Okay, welcome, Paula. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you ever so much for having me. It's an absolute honor.
Oh, it's so great to connect. So, this is going to go out on YouTube. So, hello, YouTubers, on the Evolve with Grace with Stella Grace channel. And I really love connecting with people who have a heart and soul led passion, purpose, journey. And my goodness, this lady is one of those people. Your story really stood out to me. I
Thank
know
you.
we've got mutual friends as well who feel the same. So
Yeah.
that's, there's quite a network of us out there. And I love that we've linked up and, found each other. And it's such a great community, isn't it? Like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're going to get into it. So without further ado, let me hand over to you, Paula, because your story is one of passion and resilience. And I really connected with that. I just think it's, when we're so led by something that's bigger than ourselves, that has such a lot of energy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Has such a lot of drive. Sometimes I can speak from my own experience, and maybe you'll resonate that it's what sometimes gets you out of bed in the morning when you don't feel like it. If you've got a purpose and a passion that's bigger than yourself, because you kind of at some point down the line, whether on a soul level or whether on a conscious level, signed up to this big mission.
Yep.
And that can be really enormous, can't it? And you're certainly a lady of that big mission. So without further ado, let's hear a little bit about you, please, and your background. Tell us a bit about yourself, Paula.
Yeah, sure. I was born in Wales and I was raised in South Africa. My parents moved us over there when I was 8 years old. Um, my sister passed away when she was 18 and I was 14. That kind of left a real big gap in my life. And it really affected me in more ways than one. Um, and you kind of only realize those things when you get older. Do you know
Mm,
what I mean? So yeah, when you go through struggle and you go through strife and you get into relationships, and I was in an abusive relationship for a good 6 years, mentally, physically, verbally, you name it. And you kind of lose your way a bit. You kind of forget who you are as a human being. um, and instead of taking time out to heal, I got married. um, and unfortunately, it takes two to tango, but I reckon I was extremely broken, and we ended up getting divorced 10 years later. uh, I decided I was going to move to Dubai and rebuild my life. And I think that's where I started the journey of just discovering who I was as a human being, and remembering that, yeah, I was put on this earth for a bigger purpose. I was put here to do something bigger than myself, and finding my way back to that was very important for me, because I've always had big dreams, I've always had big goals, but you know you just sometimes lose your self-confidence and you lose your self-worth. And I think for a lot of people it's hard for you to find that again.
mm,
um, but you have to strive for that, you have to push for that. And so, yeah, it was hilarious. People say, well, what made you decide that you wanted to do this great big ride? And I was like, I saw a post on Facebook and I've got a big mouth, which is hilarious because, it's partly the truth. This post on Facebook popped up about the longest walkable road in the world is from Cape Town to this little teeny tiny town in Russia. So that was the original route that I was gonna do. And I said to a friend, "Oh, this sounds amazing. I want to do something like this." And he goes, "Walking is insane, cycle it." And I went, "That's a good idea." Now, this is where my mouth gets me in trouble, because I was like on Facebook, "I'm going to do this ride. It's going to be amazing." Da, 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 thinking nobody would see this because nobody ever does. And nobody ever comments on my Facebook posts. every single friend that I had in the world saw this post and commented. And then that was it. I was like, okay, I have to now do this. But that was a good thing, because I mean, I wanted to do something that could test my boundaries and push me to my limits and show not only the world, but more importantly, probably myself, that I am a lot more capable than sometimes I give myself credit for, and that I am worthy, and I do have a bigger purpose. And then everything just grew from there, like, okay, if I'm going to do this right, then I'm going to champion myself and I'm going to champion women and I'm going to inspire people. And on the back of that, I've always had a dream and a purpose of working with kids. And I don't want to be a teacher in the conventional, setting. Um, yeah, I love working with kids and I love watching them discover their own strength, discover their own passion, discover their own intellectual abilities, because I think a lot of the time kids are just put down and we don't realize how much we are actually putting them down, and they just need somebody to build them back up again and show them that they are capable of building their own futures.
Mm. Absolutely. I mean, my goodness, Paula, you've touched on so many valuable points. I love just going back to your Facebook and the social media, and I love how the universe worked through the powers of social media that be there and really held you accountable. And that is great. And I've done the same thing myself with various things. Then it's like, okay, yeah, I've got that initial momentum, I've got that energy, I can talk about my goals, and like you, I've got some big dreams and big passion and big purpose and always have had.
Yeah,
And then it's like, okay, actually then the action's got to come in as well, and that's sometimes the harder part, but it's great because
absolutely.
you've set yourself up and you've done it, and you've followed it through, and that's just
Thank you.
incredible. But I love as well that you've gone on to the children and the next generation, and how not just enormous that is, how essential that is for us to be thinking about. I think in our what we're putting out, it's such a responsibility, I feel, around what is out there, and our
Yeah,
children, this generation at the moment, and lots of scary stuff that we could go into about that right now that we know about. And you've spoke a lot already about the ideology of how we're talking to children, the culture that we're in, and it's often less than ideal. And
yeah,
as parents, we have our own stresses and struggles that can mean our parenting is less than ideal. We're up against quite a lot as individuals, as families, and
yeah,
as a society. And I think it's really, really valid that you kind of wrapped up your point there about the importance of teaching, but that not necessarily being in that traditional sense. So I really
yeah,
love that value, I share that value, and I think it has to be now looked at. I think we're some headway now with that, looking at the education system, and how we're in hopefully inspiring and guiding children in a more, I was going to say radical, but just in a more honest and loving way, really,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
quite
yeah,
radical in some ways. And so, yeah, I really love that. And I think this also links into why I do this kind of work, and why I'm really interested in meeting up with other people who are advocating great resilience, and all those kind of great key messages, because the world only needs more of that. So yeah, so I really love that point. That's an amazing point to lead on. And perhaps we'll touch on that a bit more at the end, with thinking about your future steps. Now I
yeah.
want to hear more about your story, and I know that the audience would love to hear more about how resilience doesn't even really cut it as a word, does it? It doesn't really do it justice. So I want to get into your story, and then maybe we could come
Oh,
back to what else your thoughts are about moving forwards, and how that might inspire other people and children particularly as well.
yeah, fabulous. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I
so
mean,
walk us through, if that's possible.
the how long have you got? Do you want day
Yeah.
by day? No, I'm joking. I mean, yeah. So so okay. Let's start with how it evolved in me going from going supported, sorry, solo and unsupported. So
Mhm.
originally, the ride was supposed to be supported. And I had a couple of sponsors on board, but unfortunately, as life goes, the sponsors backed out. But they backed out at the most untimely time imaginable. So I postponed for a year. So I was supposed to start 2024. And I had a sponsor on board, and it wasn't for everything that I was needing, but it was enough to get us going and potentially, pick up people along the way. Um, and I'll touch on another point, which is really pertinent as well, in a second. So, and unfortunately, so in my head, the timings and things like that, so was starting in February, so that I hit the Middle East at the just before summer, in spring at a good weather time as opposed to heat, and then hit Norway. Well, I thought would have been spring for them, but unfortunately, I know now it would have been the dead of winter. But it's okay. But
Rolling
anyway,
with.
so because I was trying to make a big thing, I actually was trying to set the female world record, going from Cape to Cape. And I don't know, I always make my life a little bit more difficult, but I decided to go from South Africa to Norway, which I know now is the difficult way. Going from the top down is a lot easier, apparently. And because from from the start, you've got the predominant or the prevailing wind in Africa, and it's northwest. So I was constantly in a headwind the whole way through Africa, and that was just the pits. But yeah, so sponsor pulled out in December, and I was supposed to start in the February. And as you know, or probably I'm not sure, every corporation or every company has their marketing budget or their budget. It's all spent by December. There's nothing left in the budget. It's all been allocated and accounted for. So, and it's December. Who does any business over December and January, right? So it left me this tiny little window for of nothing really. There was nothing I could do. So I spoke to the team, spoke to my coach, and they're like, right, okay, no problem. You're not the first athlete. You won't be the last athlete. Um, we'll postpone for a year and we'll go again and da da da. So did the same. Got what I thought was the most lucrative sponsor that I could even. It was mind blowing how amazing this sponsor would be had they come through. And in December, they did the same. They
Wow.
pulled out. And I was like, after knowing everything that the previous sponsor had done to me, you've just done exactly the same things. And that was
Mhm.
really heartbreaking.
Mhm.
I like all the emotions you can imagine, but heartbreak. And in one conversation with my coach, I had a complete meltdown through tears and like a little bit of screaming, not at my coach obviously, but at the situation. I
Mm.
turned around and I went, do you know what, maybe I was supposed to do this solo from the start. Maybe this is the universe saying this journey is for you and you only. And my coach is like, I wouldn't have blamed you if you just walked away at that point, but you decided to forge forward. And I mean, the ticket was already booked from the previous postponement anyway. I just kept it on a um, flexi ticket, so I didn't have to worry about the flights. I adjusted everything, and yeah, I went and started on the 16th of February.
Wow. I love
So
that so much. It's like
yeah,
all the opportunities really to have come out and said, you know what, actually, maybe this isn't happening, maybe this was, but it almost looks like that just didn't even enter your sphere of like, actually, well, it's just not an option.
when you've given your whole life to something for the last 4 years, because I did 4 years of training leading up to that. So when you've concentrated and fought so hard for something, I could have easily walked away, but you know that that would have been more detrimental, I guess, than and detrimental to my self-worth,
Mm,
than actually going, do you know what? I can do it.
mm,
So I started, I did not have the ideal setup at all. And everybody was like, she's not going to make it. She's not going to make it. She has a road bike. So I should have had a gravel bike. I had a 10-liter saddlebag coming off the back of my saddle. I should have had panniers and everything that a gravel bike can take. So those are the bags that come off on the back wheel. They come over the side of the back wheel, but a road bike can't accommodate that. So I had a 10-liter saddlebag and I had an 8 kilogram backpack on my
goodness.
back for
Wow.
12,000.
You're one incredible lady.
Michael, with a backpack, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I have no option. I have no other choice. Like I've put everything that I can possibly put on my bike. So I had a top tube bag for snacks and things like that. And my bike's extra small. So I had a under the top tube, I had a bag to go underneath it. But there's no space. So I had to trash that. I had a bag on the front. And then I was like, well, I've got nowhere to put everything else. And so it was like, right, it's going to have to be a backpack. What am I thinking? Really, honestly, truly. And of course, I mean, I'd been planning the route and things like that. But like when I switched from being supported to unsupported and solo, I didn't look at the route. I was like, yeah, I'll just follow the same route. It'll be fine, and I'll do the same kilometers because in my head I was like still going for that world record. I'd even registered with the World Ultra Endurance Cycling Association for the world record, telling them I'm attempting this thing. And that it didn't happen, and that's absolutely fine because in the end the journey became more than the world record itself. But on that first day I went out and I think I did about 270 something kilometers. I'm not sure, like 250 maybe or 200, but it was a lot of kilometers. And I don't know, I've been telling everybody, but I don't know if you know about the South African landscape. So basically, it's this short little beach type thing, and then it goes straight up, and then it goes onto a plateau. So that's called the escarpment. That's straight up. So the minute you leave Cape Town, you're into the escarpment, and you're going up. And you know, it then starts, so the west side of Cape Town, or Cape Province rather, becomes desert. And I started going out and I'm like, oh, this is a bit hotter than it should be, but it wasn't start of autumn, sorry. It was still summer. It was late summer for them because they started in autumn. That's right. That was the plan. Start in autumn, get into spring, go into summer. That was the plan. But no, it was summer, summer, summer. I'm like, but yeah, so that first day was 120 something kilometers before I found the first petrol station to refill on water and get some food and stuff. So I gave myself mild heat stroke on the first day.
Oh
And I
my
pulled
goodness.
into camp and it was late. The sun was going down. I just pulled in just as the sun dipped, and the camp was closed, but they knew I was coming, so they were like, "Yep, just take yourself there, put up your tent, you'll be fine." And I started putting up my tent, and the owner came with some food, and I'm so grateful. It was like, so I stayed, and then I was like in my tent, and I had a chat with my coach, and I'm like, I'm gonna die if I continue going the way that I'd originally planned because um, I'd forgotten how vast South Africa is and how far apart things are, not just towns, but petrol stations and refueling and things like that. So I had to pivot immediately and start heading in a different direction that I hadn't even planned on doing. But it actually then proved to be the better, the more intelligent way of going, rather than trying to hack it out up in the desert with minimal, and I mean minimal, equipment and stuff like that, you know.
Mm. Just phenomenal. I mean, what an absolute journey, and going from a place of purpose and then being hit with real life and death
Like
decisions.
smacked in the face. Yeah. It's like, oh, you decided to do this, did you? Have a bit of it right now, day one. And everything that could have happened potentially happened within the first couple of weeks. You know, it was one thing after another, after another, after another. And my coach was like, well, so much for the easy start, girl. We always knew that, you know, Africa was going to be hard, but wow, you've been hit with everything like from day one.
Just incredible. Yeah.
Crazy.
And so that, I guess that really set you up, like you said, not only for navigating the adaptability that you obviously need in any moment, but
Yeah.
also to finish through and to, just achieve what, again, it wasn't an option to give up. It wasn't an option to die. So, you've got
Exactly,
to
right?
make this work. You've got to,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now navigate that. But also I love I love your energy, and I love the kind of transference of this overcoming adversity, which is, this is what I kind of, why I set up some of these kind of outlets that I do. It's what
Yeah.
my book topic's about. It's really interesting to hear about your background as well. I'm really sorry that you've had those abusive experiences. I can really
It's
resonate, and it's
yeah,
really, really challenging. And I think it goes some way into maybe making us think a little bit more about resilience and overcoming adversity, and what else we're going to kind of do with this life, because there are a lot of people going through a lot of challenges, and hence my passion for sharing more conversations about this topic in all its forms, because we all go through adversities,
yeah,
whether it's a shared experience of abuse or trauma, or whether there's differing circumstances or the same. We all kind of have this really innate ability, I feel, as people, to overcome the most destroying, potentially, and the most tragic of personal circumstances.
absolutely.
And one of my passions is, supporting people with that, hopefully inspiring people to look at their situation in either a reframed way, if they're not already, or that what they can take from it. Because it's my belief that these things, they don't just make us stronger. It's not that. Our spirit and overcoming it is what makes us stronger. Us getting through these things, us deciding to make those life or death decisions, us going, right, okay, how do I now need to just adapt here?
Yeah,
It's not, I'm really, a firm believer on not giving the power away to the
yeah,
trauma, to the circumstance,
yeah, yeah.
to what we've been through, their events. And I always say trauma is about, like, the shock state. It's not something that we still have as an identity as people. I've been through a lot of trauma, but that doesn't define me as a person. That's not my
Exactly.
identity,
No, yeah,
unless I choose it to be.
yeah,
So I just love what you're doing, and the transference of how that is so impactful and inspiring to not only yourself, but those around you and your story.
yeah,
And I guess it shows up in all forms of life. I mean, you've given such a clarifying and extreme example of how you've done that in practice with those life or death scenarios about achieving records and creating inspiration, and but I guess it really transfers to everyday life for everyday people as well, would you
for
say?
sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, people are like, oh, you're such an inspiration. And yeah, I definitely wanted to be an inspiration to people, but I also want people to be able to go, do you know what? She's normal. She's a
Mhm.
normal human being. There's nothing about her that's extraordinary. She's perfectly normal. And so therefore, if she can achieve that, I'm going to take a look at my life, and I'm going to push for something for myself. And I think a lot of people feel guilty when they decide that they're going to do something for themselves a lot of the time. And I don't, and that was me as well, that guilty feeling. Um, and I don't think you should ever feel guilty about ever wanting better for yourself, for ever
Mm,
striving to be better, and wanting to give yourself back, to the universe. Um, Not everybody has a higher drive, but in your own little, you know, whatever it might be, if you can just push yourself a little bit further, um, then you'll make a massive difference to other people around you,
mm,
and just being there and showing people that you you are working towards something that's going to help the wider community. That for me is just as important, but at the same time pushing for the betterment of yourself as well. One thing that we always say as athletes is, I strive to be better than who I was yesterday.
mm,
um, but that should apply to everybody, right? Not just
mm,
athletes. um, so yeah, if we just strive to be better people, then you are affecting the world around you, and I think that's a big thing as well. I also think people forget to talk to people. You know,
mm,
I was very much someone who bottled everything up inside.
mm,
Um, I didn't know how to talk about anything. If I had a problem, I would very much internalize it. And I was making myself sick,
mm,
physically, mentally, emotionally, you know, when you can't express yourself,
mm,
because you don't know how, you don't have the vocabulary, you don't, you know, it comes out the wrong way. Um, I think that's something that everybody needs to work on, just,
mm,
and if you have had a situation, so for example, a friend of mine, unfortunately her ex committed suicide, and immediately I got onto her and I'm like, look, I know you have your son, and he needs to talk to somebody,
mm,
because yes, it's a traumatic situation. However, he needs to understand that he was not part of the decision making that led up to this thing happening.
mm,
um, because kids don't understand. Kids do that. We know what's happened. We've seen what's happened, but somehow we project it all back onto ourselves and we shove it
mm,
inside. And now we've carried around this whole thing our whole lives, and nobody's actually come and talked to that child and
mm,
said, "Hey, how are you feeling about this? What do you,
mhm,
what do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings?"
mhm,
Um, so just, anything and everything that comes to you, you have to be able to learn to talk about it. You have to be able
mm,
to learn to share. And it's not about banging on about it and reliving that trauma every single time,
mhm.
because I think reliving trauma doesn't actually help you overcome the trauma.
No, I agree.
You have to talk to, so I say, look, talking's great, but you also need professional counseling,
Mm,
which I'm not. So I'm a great listener. I will listen to anything and everything you want to rant about, and I'll be there, and I'll understand, but I can't lead you through the steps of getting over that trauma.
mm,
And I think that's a lot of the problems we see in the world today. No offense to certain professionals, but they continue to relive that
mhm,
trauma over and
mm,
over again, and then people aren't actually getting better.
mm,
Because they're just reliving that
yeah.
experience, and you can't grow as a human being if you can't overcome that
Mm,
issue, and see how overcoming that issue is going to make you a stronger,
mm.
wiser, more well-rounded human being.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And I think, you know, as you've mentioned, as you've alluded to in your own personal experience, it's hard for us adults to sometimes understand and articulate our feelings, or, you know, and there's
Yeah,
also a lot of conditioning out there. We're moving great lengths with, you know, holistic health, mental health support, but there's a lot of interventions out there, as you've
yeah,
mentioned, professionals. There's a lot of people, and the, you know, the kind of generic counselling world, which is amazing for many people and many incredible practitioners in that field. How
absolutely.
Yeah, however, it's not the only thing, and it's not the only solution that suits all, and not always children. And you know, there's a lot, and this is why, you know, part of my book is about what true holistic health means. You know, linking up all of the different areas, which isn't just even body, can't say it, body, mind, and spirit. You know, we've also got the emotional body as well as
Yeah,
our place in the collective community.
yeah,
And so a large section of my book is about looking at each of those areas in quite a lot of detail, and what they're needing, what they're, you know, holding on to, as you mentioned, what we can have put away somewhere and be
yeah,
tinkering away without us, you know, kind of realizing. So
yeah,
it's looking at all the different aspects of our health and well-being as a whole to be
yeah,
able to start to move forward, and like you say, reliving a trauma perhaps isn't serving all of that holistic health and all of those areas of our well-being in the best way. It might be one area for some people for a certain amount of time, but that by means isn't all. And I think that is where we're lacking a bit of support for our true wellness moving forward as a, you know, whole picture.
yeah,
So, and like, you know, because it's not just us as individuals, we're, you know, as a society, as a global network even, there's a lot of change coming, which is
yeah.
exciting, but
It is
there's a
exciting.
lot to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting
yeah,
times.
yeah. I mean, I think you probably know more than me about you know, there's a lot out there, there's a lot coming. Like you said, you know, I think you're at the forefront where you see more potentially than I do, because like I'm more involved in the sports world of things, but you see it a lot in sports now as well, especially with like the mental health aspect and the mental well-being of athletes, you know.
Mm,
And I think people are now kind of realizing that the athletes are human as well, you know,
mm,
because we still do. And I mean, I think it's great. I absolutely love that we have these athletes that we put on pedestals and we look up to them and we see them as superhuman because of, you know, I mean, the Tour de France is on right now. Ah, you know, mine, I love the Tour de France and I'm going to go nuts, and, you know, and I will champion those boys every day of the week. But you know, for if for 1 second I thought that, you know, the team as a whole, not the athletes, but the team surrounding them, if they weren't looking after their health and well-being,
mm,
I would be blasting it all over the internet going, this needs to change. But that's as a global collective as well, not just as a sector of, you know, human beings. I think I do believe that athletes drive change, because
mm,
they do look at athletes, the world looks at athletes and they go, oh well, they're doing that, I'm going to try this. So I do think that there is a market there for athletes to champion their, you know, mental health, and we're seeing that now, and that
mm,
is opening the eyes to, you know, normal people. I
mm,
hate that word. Nobody's normal. Everybody's awesome. But you know, we've all got that little bit of spark in us that will drive us to do whatever we want to do. So yeah.
mm.
But you know, I think um I can't remember the point I was getting to. I do apologize.
No,
So
it's absolutely fine.
yeah, I think going back to what you were saying, you know, where your book is and what it's doing for people to understand and to realize that, you know, there is something the other side of that,
Mm,
that, you know, that you can overcome that
mhm,
situation, that there's nothing that can hold you back except for yourself,
mm.
you
Yeah.
know.
and that's one of the themes of the book, and something that's just a real strong value base for me, having gone through quite a lot. It's that real inner alchemy. It's being able to, and I can spout all this off, and it's not in the sense of saying that that's an easy process, or that
Yeah, no, yeah,
it's like it's a factor that we should all be doing. It's not like that. It's like inner alchemy in the sense of, because we've been through such challenge, we can really, if we can be, brave enough, have enough support around us to dig in and, pull up that resilience that we have in our innate, incredible human spirit,
yeah,
and really use it to kind of look at my book's called From Grit to Grace, to really look at our grit.
that's
um,
amazing.
and really look at how we can alchemize that. And of course, the beauty, I want to say beauty, can be dressed up as, it can be dressed up in disguise sometimes as a curse, not a blessing. But the beauty of this kind of process is that it will be lifelong. From
Yeah,
grit to grace is an example that it won't be from to grace. Oh, okay, we've alchemized our shit, now we're good. Life doesn't
yeah,
work like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
unfortunately. We might have gone through a lot in the past. That doesn't necessarily mean we're done. We're healed,
yeah,
we're sorted.
yeah, yeah,
And so this is why, again, I love this mindset of work, this growth mindset, this um, bringing in the spiritual, however that looks for each person, whatever their faith system is, bringing in all the elements that, as we're saying, makes people feel well enough to keep going, to keep alchemizing, to
yeah,
keep going from grit to grace, because we're always both, aren't we? We're always the grit and the grace. We've always got
absolutely.
all of it,
Yeah,
within
yeah,
us and around us.
yeah.
So it's that real cyclical learning and growth and development is why I'm also passionate about having these conversations.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I agree with that. You sometimes you think you're, oh, this is it, I'm out of it now, and
Yeah,
I'm done, it's finished and final. And then something happens and you're like, oh, I'm back in it again, and
yeah.
I've got to start again and I've got to push again. But as long as you're learning every single
Mm,
time and as long
mhm,
as you're evolving, that's great. So I got divorced and I actually had a 3-year mental breakdown. And you don't, because it happened so gradually, I
mhm,
didn't realize, what was going on until I was right at the bottom of a big black dark well with no light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And it was a really awful time. Um, and I finally decided to get some help. And I spoke with um, my performance coach. Lovely chap. He was so performance, being life performance. Not he does athletic performance as well, but life performance. And I genuinely thought um, that it was going to be me just banging on about my problems and this, that, and the other, and whatnot. And we never spoke about my problems once, which was quite funny because it was completely the opposite of what I thought was gonna. But what he did do was he gave me the tools to get myself through the process of the grit,
mm,
so that when it happened again, I was like, I have tools.
mm,
I learnt in that process of getting myself through that really bad patch, so that when the next bad patch hit, it yes, it was bad, but it felt like more manageable.
mm. Yeah.
And I think that you have to learn, you can't expect life to be all roses,
Mm,
because that's not life, right?
no.
But you have to push and you have to learn, and in that learning process we evolve and we grow as a human being. And then of course, yeah, you can share that experience with other people with confidence, going, well, I've done this worked for me. And I don't ever believe that everything works for everybody, but
Mm,
finding out what works for you and what motivates you to get out of the bed in the
mm,
morning,
mhm,
that's important. And I think, yeah, just having that, that sense of wanting to be bigger, better, whatever it is in your life and pushing in
Mm,
your life, it is important for every individual on the planet.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And you've touched on that point beautifully, that if we're not kind of looking at stuff and overcoming it and moving forward, then we're not evolving. So, it's ultimately about evolving, isn't it, in whatever way that looks for us. And to me as well, the evolving bit is, as we were saying, not just about going, okay, right, I've got this completely sorted now, but it's about saying, but I'm working on it.
Yeah,
I'm working on it. As you say, I'm working to feel better, you know be more comfortable to be around what I'm putting out, because naturally when we fill our cup, it's that old adage, you touched on it as well, we're not really conditioned to do for self first, which is crazy given that
yeah,
when we do, we're of better service to everyone else anyway.
exactly.
So it has to start with the self to ripple outwards. This is another awful lot that I refer to and pull apart in the book, because it's so huge for our well-being and the well-being of the planet. It actually doesn't get much bigger, I don't feel, than starting with ourselves to what we're
Yeah,
then putting out, what goes on in the whole world, because we're connected in that way as an
yeah,
energy, as frequency, as well as physically. So
yeah,
it's actually quite a responsibility not to look after yourself, because we're then walking around unwell and not
yeah,
being able to feed into anything else positively anyway. So
yeah, yeah.
it's interesting stuff. So Paula, I'd love to hear, with all of, I mean, you've broken records, you've achieved so much of your own personal
Didn't break
ambition.
the record.
Oh, you didn't? No. Okay, so
Did
with that,
finish, but I didn't do it.
you finished. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned about the side to side, you had some aspects though, didn't you, where you were, I mean, I don't know, you're a record breaker in my eyes, to be
Oh,
honest.
bless you.
A million
No,
percent.
what happened was, so the Ultra World Cycling Association, or Endurance Cycling, I can never remember how, it's a long word name. They've got all their rules and things like that. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other, and that's fine. I get it, because otherwise it. How are they going to validify the ride itself? And I had to do a certain amount of kilometers, which again is cool. But what happened was I'd gone through the whole of Kenya, through the whole of Africa up to Kenya. So I did South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, got to the Ethiopian border. And, there were a lot of, oh, backtrack a little bit. Let's go back into Zambia. In Zambia, I got hit by a truck. Um, and obviously I'm fine. Everything, nothing was broken. The bike was fine. I just had all bruising down my right hand side. And then the truck, we all stopped. We were on the side of the road, and it just so happened that there was a district councillor or chancellor or whatever he called himself, either coming in the opposite direction or behind us when it all happened. And he insisted that the truck driver drive me to this town called Mpika. And I was like, no, 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 drive me to the town before that, because Mpika's too far away. Because the rule stated that if I skip kilometers, I have to go back and redo those kilometers. Well, I was on the truck road. And for you to understand, it wasn't just one or two trucks, it was massive convoys of trucks. There was like 10, 10 in a convoy at some point. And I was on a non-hard shoulder. There was no hard shoulder whatsoever. And then the truck tires had grooved out channels. So now I'm cycling on just the lip, with, on top of the channel. And, I've got videos of trucks, and they're just slicing
Oh,
by me, and so I was like, okay, this is too dangerous for starters,
mm,
but I'm on it now and I can't stop. So we forged forward, and that was right up until the truck hit me. So he did then take me to the next town as I requested, and overnight, my my safety head kicked in, maybe, I don't know. And I was like, safety over world record for
Mm-hmm.
starters. My safety, my body is my priority first, more than a world record. And I don't believe that I could cycle this the to Mpika, the next 100 and however many kilometers safely.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I jumped on a bus, and I was like, do you know what? That was potentially one of the biggest decisions that I could have made, putting my safety first, because on that bus ride, I saw trucks overturned. There were potholes bigger than cars. I saw trucks leaning off the road to give way to a truck coming, because the road wasn't even wide enough for two trucks passing each other safely. And I was like, can you imagine if I was cycling on that? Because they don't see you, because you're down there and they're up there, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't see you, they don't care about you, in their heads, they're just getting to their destination.
Mm-hmm.
So I jumped on a bus. So for that whole section, it was about 250 kilometers. Now I could have made that up along the way. So the plan was to get in to do it. So my plan deviated a little bit from the original. I'd go into Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, international airport, fly over to Amman, and then cycle the Middle East to continue, um, and skip the really dangerous countries. So northern Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt's not dangerous, obviously, but it kind of was going that way. I can't get through the top of northern Africa to get safely into Egypt. So yeah, so I was going to fly over.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was going to come into Dubai, do 250 kilometers to make up the distance in Dubai, and off I'd
Mm-hmm.
go again. But Africa kicked my butt.
Fair
Africa
enough.
really kicked my butt. And I got to the border of Ethiopia, and I started getting a barrage of messages. They were like, there were so many people concerned about my safety in
Mm-hmm.
Ethiopia, that I had the most anxiety I've ever felt about through this whole ride. I'd never felt anxious about entering a country. And up until that point, and I was like, okay, I was getting messages, well, they don't like you, you don't fit the people, this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay. And so got to the border, started speaking to customs, and then they were suddenly like, well, we want money for this, we want money for that, we want money for the other. And it probably would have added up to about 3,000 to 5,000 pounds. I'm like,
Wow.
I'm not paying that. And so then I
Mm-hmm.
turned around, and somebody who volunteered just to follow me in their car for support safety, he was there as well. And I said to Andy, hey, dude, like, we're not going in. Not only am I more concerned, I'm concerned for my own safety, but I'm more concerned for you, because you're going to have to get back to Kenya by yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced that you're going to get back safely. So
Wow.
I am not putting you in that danger. Let's turn around. And so we went back to Nairobi, and I flew over to Dubai, and I had visa issues there. So long story short, I missed too many kilometers and things like that. And I actually then, as I started going through the Middle East, it was like getting up to 35 degrees through day, and it was just getting hotter and hotter. And I was like, by the time I get into Iraq, you're not going to be able to cycle through the day. And so I flew over. I skipped Iraq completely, because I'm like, I don't have time for this nonsense anymore. So I flew over into Turkey, and I continued up through Turkey and cycled all the way then from Turkey. But yeah, so unfortunately, the world record was no longer in sight. Um, but I was already there. I'm not going to finish I'd gotten that far. So yeah, giving up wasn't an option, and I was going to finish it.
Absolutely. And it's just such an incredible achievement without that bit anyway. And actually, like you said, I mean, what other options would you have had? You can't put your
Yeah.
your life in danger, can you?
Yeah,
That's,
no.
and actually, I think on the theme of what we're talking about, that wouldn't have been the resilient option. That would have been a silly option, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that would have been just pure stupidity.
Mm,
It would have been showing the world that, I don't care about myself as a
mm,
human being, that I am
mm,
willing to put myself in a potentially dangerous
mm.
situation. And then, you'd instead of people saying potentially, oh wow, you did this thing and you've got the grit and you've got this resilience in you, they would have been like, why? Why did you do
Yeah,
that to yourself?
exactly.
you know,
Yeah,
and yeah,
because
that's
it's
not the
actually,
message.
no, it's not. And it's like you said, it's, about the grit, is about the journey, and about the adaptability and what you've overcome and getting around. And as you mentioned earlier, which is why for a moment I thought you meant you had to break the record. But when you mentioned earlier, actually it did a lot more than that anyway, in the
Yeah,
sense of, the message for women and the route and the challenge of the terrain and all of those things
yeah,
were actually, superseding of just a world record, to be fair, in my
yeah,
mind.
yeah, definitely. And I think the minute I got hit by the truck,
Mm,
and it wasn't getting hit by the truck because that happened all a bit too quickly, but it was the on that truck ride where I was like, in my heart, I knew I shouldn't be on that truck. I should be on my bike. I
mm,
mean, I don't think I could have ridden that day, and I was in the middle of nowhere, so I had no choice anyway. Um, but I think in that second, I realized that the world record wasn't up for grabs, you
mm,
know. But yeah, you have to make a decision to continue. And it was funny because I had a full blown mental breakdown in Norway. By the way, I was 700 kilometers away from the finish, and I'd woken up that morning and I got on the phone to my parents and we were having a chat. By the way, Norway is stupidly expensive. Okay, so thank you to everybody that donated money to get me through this, because without them there's no way I would have finished. I started with a bank balance of zero and I finished with a bank balance of zero, and honestly, the donations that came in, everybody knew that they were helping me to finish my goal.
mm,
So I have to thank those guys first, but Norway was just stupidly expensive. So on top of all of this, I did have a financial worry.
mm,
Could I continue to forge forward due to lack of finances?
mm,
And so yeah, my parents, they're not wealthy, they're on their pension, so they were helping and they were chipping in when they could, so I had that constant worry of being a burden on them as well, even though
mm,
they kept telling me I wasn't. I knew I was. um, so in Norway, I woke up one morning, had a chat with my parents, sat down, and just went, I can't finish.
mm,
I'm done. I'm physically, emotionally, mentally finished. I'm done. I can't do it. I'm gonna get on a bus. I'm gonna get myself on a train. I'm gonna go to the airport and I'm flying home. I am done.
mm,
And my coach, bless him, he got hit by a car himself on his mountain bike, so he sustained two fractures in his hips, and he
oh
was
my
in. I
goodness.
know, right? It's just crazy. And so he was having physio when I sent the message, I'm done. And he goes,
Mm,
okay, I'll phone you after my physio. Just take a minute. I'll phone you after the physio session's done. And I went, don't worry, I'm getting on a train. And he phones me immediately and he goes, don't you dare. He goes, do you want to be known as the girl that almost finished? And I'm like,
yeah.
no, not really. So we had a good conversation. We had about an hour. And he was like, you know what? Nobody would have blamed. I wouldn't have blamed you. When you got hit by that truck, I said to my wife, so Chris, fab woman, love her to bits. He goes, I said to Chris, she's done. If she wakes up tomorrow and she says she's quitting, I'm not going to blame her whatsoever. But you got up and you continued, and now you're in Norway, 700 meters. I wish it was 700 meters, 700 kilometers away from the finish, and you're telling me you quit. don't don't quit. And I'm like, okay. And then, just having that one little conversation with him,
Mhm.
and able just to reset, rethink, calm
Mhm.
down, and go, yeah, I'm only 700 kilometers away from the
Mhm.
finish. What am I thinking? And pushing forward with that.
But that's, again, incredible. We have those moments, but I think I can't not say here at this point that the financial bit of the worry, the position that we're in as women, and I don't want
Yeah,
to go down that whole, rabbit hole, but
sure.
let's be real and be
Yeah,
honest and say actually we are in a lesser socioeconomic position as women. And
yeah,
this is the thing, and this is the financial pressure. This is when
yeah,
we've, may have had difficult circumstances in the past. We've not been able to, for different reasons, been working through difficult issues, maybe have not had as many years building our kind of
yeah,
life
yeah,
investments, things like savings, because we're
yeah,
functioning on the day to day, because we're in a lesser position, let's face
yeah,
it. And so
yeah,
the fact that that financial pressure came in and you're considering if you're a burden to your parents,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is the mental shit and the pressure that we have to contend with in our position, is another credit to you, but
Thank
also
you.
such a flag to the dynamics at play here, but
Yeah,
behind the story of all of these incredible people such as yourself doing these incredible things, there's also a story of resilience in terms of what we're navigating to even get to X, Y, or Z.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
can really relate to that as well. It can be really hand to mouth if you're, whether you're bringing up children or not, you are operating likely on a lesser pay. If you've had mental health vulnerabilities as well, that will have worked against you organically because of
yeah,
time and support that's taken up. It's just, it's a lot. It's a real
yeah,
lot.
yeah. And that, oh, going back to what I said right back in the beginning, I want to touch on something. So in the whole uh lead up finding the sponsors and things like that, I later discovered, and I think one of the girls on the radio in Dubai, one thing that she picked up on was women in in sports. If you're a woman in sports, especially if you're a solo athlete, nobody wants to sponsor you because you're a
Wow.
woman. And it was she was on stage. I can't remember the event or whatever, but I just remember the crux of the story. She was on stage and she was talking about women in sports and endurance and things like that, and not getting the sponsorship and not getting the backing of bigger corporations. And literally the next guest walked onto the stage and it was a chap, I don't know who, it was a bloke, and he was like, thank you to all my sponsors. And it was like, he'd done
Wow.
this incredible thing, but he got all the sponsorship in the world because
Mm.
he was a bloke.
Mm.
you know he was a solo athlete, so we don't sponsor solo athletes. Your argument goes out the window there. I'm really sorry, but it really does go out the window when you've
Mm.
got one girl on stage talking about, women need more support, we need more backing. It's a fact that women have better endurance than men. No offense, men, but you are good at the fast stuff and we're good at the long stuff.
Mm.
And we can't get the backing, we can't get the sponsorship. And then a bloke comes on, oh yeah, no, I got everything. And he raised all the money that he wanted and this, that, and the other. I think it's
Wow.
disgusting.
Yeah, that is disgusting. I totally agree. And again, I'm just so glad that you're putting this message out there, really honestly. I'm actually really glad we've been able to have that conversation. I wasn't aware at the time when we had
Yeah,
arranged this of that being a factor for you, but of course it is.
yeah,
Of course it is, because this is what we're navigating in the everyday world. So going for these incredible achievements would be no different in that kind of system. So here we are having the conversations.
yeah,
Look at us go, these empowered women, being honest and telling it like it is. Let's not be silenced. Let's not
exactly.
pussyfoot
Yeah,
around it anymore.
yeah.
So I love that, and I love that about your energy. It's just been incredible to talk to you. Unfortunately,
Thank
there's not
you.
a huge amount of time left, but I
No
would just
worries.
love to finish on a couple of minutes of what's next for you, and how you're again, I'm making it more difficult for you to summarize now. I've just said that, but how you're continuing with these incredible messages of all kinds that you're really pioneering.
Yeah, so first, I'm building the foundation. I'm working on the funding for the foundation, getting that started, reaching out to children in disadvantaged communities that really need the mentorship and the leadership. There's a beautiful chap in Cape Town who's reached out to me, and he's doing incredible work with the kids and cycling in his community. So I really want to champion cycling as well, because I believe every kid needs a bike. That's just, a sense of freedom that everybody can experience. So that's going to take up quite a lot of my attention. So I'm trying
Mm,
to get guest speaking spots and become a keynote speaker and things like that on, you know, whatever platform comes around, and things
mm,
like that. I have a book I'm going to be writing about my ride, most definitely. So there's that. And then I have, let's just, sorry, two things. I'm never going to take a salary off my foundation. I do not believe in that. All the money that comes into the foundation will go directly to the kids in benefiting them in whichever way is um, beneficial for them, right? So
amazing.
yeah. So of course I've got my own career aspirations on top of that.
Hmm.
Um, I don't want to give out anything just yet, but it's going to be really
Okay,
cool. It's going to be really cool, and it's going to be
cool.
revolving around cycling for sure. I'll tell you
Amazing.
in private.
Oh, I'm so excited. And yeah, I can't wait to hear. And we'll also, I love that the listeners will be needing to watch this space to,
Yes,
keep up with what's on your journey ahead. So quickly, Todd, can I
exactly.
ask you what the foundation's called? Is that out there now?
So I haven't decided on a name for it yet. I
Okay,
wanted to call it Future something, but I've been mulling around. But yeah, it will be. I don't know. I
that's
haven't figured it out yet. But
well, if people want to keep in touch with your story and your future
yes.
journeys, Paula, where can people find you?
So they can find me on Instagram on the long ride C2C. So Cape to Cape with the number two, not the word. They can reach out on my email if they want to. So that's Paula at thelongride.com, C2C.com.
Amazing.
Um, I am working on my website. I had a couple of glitches, unfortunately, and it did crash. But we're working on getting it back up again, bigger, better, brighter, and everything on there. So I want that synergy between all the social media working
Mm,
properly. So the website is called Long Ride C2C as well. Um,
amazing.
yeah, so there are definitely, all those avenues. I do have a YouTube channel. It's not quite as active as it needs to be. Whew, all this social media stuff, my head spins. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it just goes meh in my head, and I'm gone.
But that's, yeah, it's part of this, all of this stuff, isn't it? But it sounds like you're doing amazing. And we can put the links under this video as well for your Instagram and
Fab.
your email in the
That'd be
meantime.
great.
And
Thank
then
you.
people will have a point of contact to keep in
Amazing.
touch with you, your incredible
Yay.
energy and your
Thank
incredible
you.
story. And I know that you'll continue to be it, just
Hopefully.
you,
Yeah.
beautiful you and
Thank
inspirational
you.
you. And thank you so much for sharing your time and chats with me today. I'm really, really grateful. And
Thank
I'm
you for
really
having me, babe.
oh, you're so welcome. It's so good to be in touch now. I know that I'd love to keep in touch. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've just really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll look forward to coming back to Evolve with Grace with me, Stella Grace, for a different topic next time, and maybe even again Paula in the future for her next adventures. But for now, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Lots of love.
Bye.
So I'm gonna stop the recording. I haven't stopped the recording yet, but it's all right, I'll edit this bit out. I can't, let me just see if I can, ah,
You got it?
I've got, yeah, I've